The cafe on Jeju Island was unusually quiet that evening. Outside, the sea breathed in long, slow waves, like an old memory refusing to fade. The sun was sinking behind Hallison's shadow, spilling gold and rose across the glass windows. Inside, a man sat alone near the corner, tall, composed, familiar. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a depth that spoke of years spent in silence. Gong Yoo had chosen this place for a reason. He said he wanted the sound of waves to accompany his words, because, as he put it softly, the sea listens better than people do. It was his first one-on-one interview in nearly 5 years. The last time he spoke publicly about his private life was before The Silent Sea premiered, and even then, he avoided personal questions with that polite half-smile that both charmed and distanced people. But this time felt different. He didn't bring a manager, no cameras, no makeup artist, just himself, a black sweater, and a steaming cup of Americano. The air felt heavy with something unspoken. "I guess people want to know why I'm still alone," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "They see me in all these love stories. Yet off-screen, I have none." He chuckled softly, not out of humor, but as if laughing might make the truth easier to bear. Porter hesitated before replying, aware that every word could open a door Gong Yoo had kept locked for decades. Continued, voice low and deliberate. "It's funny, people think I chose loneliness. But sometimes, loneliness chooses you first." His tone was calm, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. The cafe owner, pretending to clean tables nearby, slowed her movements as if afraid to interrupt. Outside, the tide drew closer to the rocks. Inside, the conversation deepened. Gong Yoo spoke about fame with a kind of detached acceptance, how his face became public property after Goblin, how even his quiet moments were dissected into content. "Everyone wanted the guardian from the drama," he said. "But I was just a man learning how to breathe again." He described the small apartment he moved into after the filming ended, a minimalist place near Namsan. The walls were bare except for a single painting, a sketch of the ocean. No awards, no posters, no reminders of who he was to the world. It was peaceful. But sometimes, peace feels like absence. The reporter asked you if he ever felt lonely. Gong Yoo smiled faintly. "Lonely? Yes. But I learned that being alone and being lonely aren't the same. One feels like freedom. The other feels like forgetting how to live." His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the cup, the steam touching his face like fog. The silence after that sentence was almost sacred. He talked about his routines, waking early, walking down quiet alleys of Seoul when everyone was asleep. No mask, no hat. No one caring who I was, he recalled. I could buy street coffee, talk to the old vendor, and for a few minutes, I wasn't Gong Yoo. I was just a man. As the light dimmed, the conversation drifted towards something heavier, not fame, not success, but something far more intimate. "You asked about love," he said, breaking the stillness. "There was someone I loved once. Truly." The words landed gently, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the weight behind them. He didn't look at the reporter, his eyes were fixed on the sea, its color darkening into indigo. She wasn't famous. Not from this world of cameras and scripts. She was just someone who saw me before the world did. His lips curved into the faintest smile, tender, almost invisible. The reporter leaned forward, sensing the fragile truth unfolding. Gong Yoo continued slowly, as if each word was being pulled from a deep, painful memory. "It was before everything. Before Coffee Prince. Before I knew what fame felt like. We met by accident, in a small bookstore in Hongdae." He paused, the memory flickering behind his eyes. "I was just another struggling actor back then, reading scripts that never got produced. She was there sketching in a notebook. I thought she was a student. But later I found out she was an illustrator. She drew quietly. The world didn't exist. I think that's what drew me to her." The sound of a bell from the harbor drifted in through the window. Gong Yoo's expression softened. "We used to walk along the Han River at night," he said. "She'd talk about the stars, and I'd talk about dreams. We were young, broke, and foolish enough to think love could protect us from everything." For a long time, he didn't speak. The only sound was the whisper of wind pressing against the window pane. When he finally did, his voice was lower, almost a whisper. "But dreams change. People change. I started getting roles, traveling, disappearing for months. She stayed behind, painting. Waiting. At some point, we both realized I was chasing something that had no end. The reporter asked what happened next. Gong Yoo's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. She told me she wanted to go to Paris, he said. She wanted to study art there. I told her I'd wait. But she smiled, that quiet, knowing smile, and said, "Don't wait for me. Just remember me when it rains." He looked out the window again. The sea was almost black now, the sky bleeding into it. "It's been years," he said. "Sometimes I think of her when the rain hits the glass. I wonder if she ever found what she was searching for." The reporter didn't dare ask her name. The moment was too fragile to intrude upon. Gong Yoo took a deep breath, as if exhaling years of memory. "People think solitude is sad," he said softly. "But sometimes it's the only way to keep love pure, untouched by time, or by regret." The lights of Jeju's harbor flickered in the distance. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. His face was calm again, the confession complete. But something in his silence still trembled. Porter sensed the interview was over, though no one had said so. As they stood to leave, Gong Yoo turned once more to the sea and murmured, almost to himself, almost to her, "I still remember her scent when it rained." The reporter stepped outside, the cool wind biting at her skin. Behind her, through the window, Gong Yoo remained at the table, motionless, a man caught between memory and peace. The sound of the waves carried his words into the night. Where in that quiet rhythm, the loneliness that had followed him for years finally began to soften. The morning after the Jeju interview was wrapped in mist. The island had rained through the night, the roads glistening and the air heavy with the scent of salt and pine. Gong Yoo arrived early at the small Hanat guest house where the second half of the conversation was to take place. He wore a beige coat and a knitted scarf. Air damp from the drizzle. The same quiet that had enveloped the cafe followed him here, as if silence itself had chosen to stay close. The guest house was tucked between old stone walls, overlooking a path that led toward Halazon. Rose from a kettle in the corner, the faint smell of roasted barley tea drifting through the room. There were no cameras again. Production crew. Just a recorder placed gently on the table, and 2 cups of tea that cooled slowly as time unfolded. When the reporter entered, Gong Yoo greeted her with a small nod. His expression was softer today, the edges of his sadness less sharp. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "It's strange. Talking about her brought back things I thought I'd buried." He paused, looking out at the mist curling above the mountains. "Some memories shouldn't be buried at all." The reporter asked you if you wanted to continue where they left off. You smiled faintly. "I suppose it's time." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn envelope. The edges were creased, the paper yellowed. "This is the last thing she gave me before she left," he said. Inside was a photograph, not of them together, of a seaside painting, half finished, brushstrokes soft and melancholic. Her name was Seo Ha-won, he said quietly, finally breaking the spell of secrecy that had lasted almost 2 decades. She was an illustrator. She used to draw scenes she could never visit, oceans she hadn't seen, skies she couldn't touch. Art was her way of remembering places she'd never been. He smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 sighs. "We met in 2004. At a bookstore in Hongdae. Was sketching the owner's cat. I remember she had paint on her fingers and didn't seem to care. I bought a poetry book I didn't even want, so I'd have a reason to talk to her again." He laughed quietly, embarrassed at the memory. "It sounds foolish now, doesn't it?" The reporter shook her head. "It sounds human." The first time that day, Gong Yoo's laughter filled the room, low, warm, unguarded. It softened the morning. "We didn't have much," he said, "but we had time. And when you're young, time feels endless." Described the small rooftop apartment they used to share during the early years of his career. There was no elevator, no heater, a tiny stove and a window that leaked every time it rained. She'd sit by that window and paint. Read scripts out loud. She said my voice made her feel like the world outside wasn't so cold. But as his acting career took off, things began to shift. I started filming longer hours. She started painting less. There were days we barely spoke. I thought we were just tired. But maybe we were drifting. I softened. She once told me, "You're starting to live in stories that don't belong to you." Understand it then. Now I do. He looked down, eyes tracing the edge of the photograph. Coffee prints aired. Everything changed. Suddenly. I wasn't just Gong Yoo anymore. I was Gong Yoo. The man everyone loved but no one really knew. Reporters, fans, awards, they all came at once. And in the middle of that noise, she disappeared quietly. The reporter asked if he tried to stop her. He nodded slowly. I did. I went to the airport that morning. She was flying to Paris. I told her I'd go with her if she asked. But she just smiled. She said, "Belong to the screen now. Not to me." His voice faltered, the words catching between memory and pain. I wanted to be angry. But I couldn't. She was right. Rain began to fall again, tapping softly on the paper doors. Gong Yoo's gaze followed it, lost in thought. "She wrote me one last letter a few months later," he said. It came without a return address. Said she'd found peace in a small atelier in Montmartre. That she hoped I'd find mine someday, not in applause, but in stillness. He smiled bitterly. I never replied. I didn't know where to send it. For years after, he carried that silence like a secret companion. He worked relentlessly, films, dramas, endorsements, filling his life with emotion. Hoping it would drown the stillness she left behind. But it didn't, he confessed. No matter how loud the world became, he could still hear her voice in the quiet moments. The reporter asked if he ever saw her again. Gong Yoo hesitated. Nodded faintly. Once. About 7 years ago, in Paris. The word seemed to surprise even him. I was there for a film festival. I walked past a small gallery near Rue Lepic and saw her painting in the window. She looked the same, older, yes, but the same calm eyes. I didn't go inside. He smiled gently, a single tear reflecting the pale light. I thought about it for hours. I even crossed the street twice. But in the end, I realized that moment, just seeing her alive was enough. Some things are more beautiful when left untouched. The reporter remained silent, sensing the sacredness of what she was hearing. Gong Yoo continued, his tone steady now, as if each word were an offering of closure. That's when I understood why I could never marry. Never fully move on. It wasn't that I was waiting for her. That she had already given me everything love was meant to teach, and taking another person's heart without being whole felt unfair. He took a slow sip of tea, now cold. Always ask why I am still single. I suppose this is the answer. I'm not lonely because I have no one. I'm lonely because a part of me is still there, sitting in that old bookstore, watching her sketch a cat. Sighed, the mist began to lift, revealing a sliver of blue sky. Gong Yoo looked at it with quiet wonder. Think about her less now, he said. Not because I've forgotten, but because remembering doesn't hurt anymore. The reporter asked if he believed he'd ever love again. Gong Yoo smiled, the same tender, wistful smile from the cafe. Love doesn't leave. It just changes its shape. Maybe one day, I'll meet someone who understands that. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life learning how to. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain ease into drizzle. Gong Yoo glanced at the photograph one last time before sliding it back into his coat pocket. She used to say that when it rains, the world slows down so hearts can catch up, he murmured. I think mine finally did. The interview ended. Gong Yoo walked outside. The mountain air was crisp, the clouds parting to reveal sunlight spilling across the hills. He stopped near a cluster of cherry trees, their leaves trembling with droplets. The reporter watched from the doorway as he closed his eyes and tilted his face toward the sky, a man not broken, but quietly reborn. Story that began with silence ended there, between the sound of distant waves and the whisper of wind. Gong Yoo didn't look back as he walked down the stone path. Figure fading into the mist. Somewhere across the sea, in a Paris studio lit by morning light, Xiao Haoan was painting the same sky. The reporter turned off the recorder and wrote in her notes. He didn't just speak of love. He spoke of what remains after love, the silence that shapes a man's soul. And when the story was published, the nation fell silent. For once, headlines didn't shout, they listened. Very end of the article. The writer added one final line, a tribute to confession that felt less like gossip and more like truth. He loved once, deeply. That love grew the solitude we mistook for mystery. That night, the sea around Jeju shimmered under a pale moon. Waves broke softly against the shore, carrying his words far beyond the island, perhaps even to Paris, where a woman looked up from her canvas and smiled, as if she'd heard something only her heart could recognize.